Hello and welcome to this short video. This short video is about leaders, yes, and some other topics related to that. And behind me is Tenerife. Yes. And somewhere I don't want to fall. So without further ado, on with the video. Yes. So first of all, I'd like to talk about leaders for the people who are just new to the sport and don't understand their importance. A leader is basically for three things, right? One is abrasion resistance, the second is to trick fish, and the third is to cast a weight that is heavier than the main line, right? That's the basic three, okay? That's it. And in this video, that's exactly what I'm going to talk about, and some other finer details that maybe the more experienced people might appreciate or not, depending on your opinion, of course, right? So first of all, I'm going to talk about multipliers. And also in that topic, I'm going to talk about braid and multipliers and braid leaders and mono leaders. Okay. So when I changed from monofilament to braided fishing line, I wanted to be able to pendulum cast like I used to with the mono, and the consensus of the day was it wasn't possible. And I believe this is because people were still trying to get every little bit of extra performance out of the tackle that was available at the time. And I think what a lot of people did was they thought, I will go 8 strand and I will go really thin. And this was probably the mistake that a lot of people made, because multipliers, they are used to running mono, and my thinking was that that's what people had done. They pushed the envelope too far in one direction and they exceeded the performance parameters of the reel, right? So then I thought to myself, right, why go any thinner than 15-pound mainline mono, which is a kind of a standard. Some people fish 12, but 15-pound mono was a good all-round fishing line, and its general diameter is 0.35. Okay, so in order to keep on pendulum casting and have the extra strength and the thin diameter of braid, I went with 4 strand. It's a lot less supple than 8 strand, and it's a lot thicker for the breaking strain than 8 strand. And so I thought it would work well for pendulum casting. And I was right, it does work extremely well for pendulum casting. So you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but you're not going to get any extra distance. Well, actually, apart from the higher breaking strain that you have, yes, you do get a little bit of extra distance as well. And this is for 2 reasons. One reason is because when you change the braid, you will notice its slippy nature, right? It goes through the guides with a lot less resistance than monofilament does. And when I started this, I noticed that straight away. And I wasn't even fishing with a leader at that time because I was just getting started. I didn't know where to go with it. And I thought to myself, if I stick a mono leader on this, it's going to cause me bird's nests or backlashes or whatever you want to call it if I'm fishing with bait. Probably not. If you're just casting a sinker, it probably won't make any difference at all. But if you've got a large bait like I was fishing back then, I think that it will cause more overruns than normal. Okay, I just went with braid. There is so little resistance when this goes through the guide, and there is virtually no stretch at all, that it adds so much more to your casting. You have to put less effort into it. Because of the lack of stretch, it loads that rod up much quicker than it would have before. So you're storing more energy in the blank of the fishing rod, and you've got less resistance through the guides, and this will give some people extra distance, which is valuably needed, especially if you're fishing on a rock mark or something like that. You can't get the rod tipped down, you need that rod to load up. If that's a problem for you, you need that extra distance, change your fishing line, change your leader. If you're fishing with just mono, just change to a braid leader. It will improve your casting because it doesn't stretch, it doesn't suck the energy out of the rod. So that's just a quick tip there. And this brings me on to the point of leaders used to cast weights that exceed the main line. This is it. 100-pound 4-strand leader, so you can cast anything up to 10 ounces. And a lot of people have written in and asked me, how long should the leader be? So how long should the leader be? The leader should be the length of whatever rod you're using, plus about 50 centimeters longer than the tip of the rod. And depending on the style of casting that you use, there are different amounts of wraps you should have around the reel. The shorter the leader, the longer you're going to cast. That's it. But if you're going to be pendulum casting, you will need more turns on the spool than you would have if you're not pendulum casting, okay? Pendulum casting, sometimes the line slips a little bit through your fingers, sometimes. And if you load that rod up and you go to the push-pull, it might snap the main line and you might injure somebody. So then it is advised to have a minimum of 5 turns on the spool. If you're just doing an overhead hammer, 2 or 3 turns, you're good. Pendulum casting usually comes out to the side and it breaks when you put the most power on it, and that usually sends it shooting off to one side. So it can be extremely dangerous, and that's why you don't pendulum cast on crowded beaches or practice in crowded areas. Braid will give you one up on a big fish straight away. Because of the lack of stretch in it, you can just lay it on that fish. You can give it everything you've got, right? So you can just stick it to it. For instance, when multipliers became unpopular in South Africa is when the fixed spool reels and the rods caught up with the fishing line, i.e. the guides changed and the reels changed. They got bigger and they could get more line onto them. And as soon as that happened, things started changing in South African fishing. Slide baiting became less popular and people were catching much bigger fish much more quickly with much more ease. So if you put it onto a multiplier, it's just bedlam. It's fantastic. There's nothing you can't do with this. I've landed 200-pound fish on this little tiny reel, okay, with 50-pound braid. How's that? Okay, but it took me about 40 minutes to land a 200-pound fish. Okay, actually it was more than 200 pounds, but let's not split hairs. It has changed my fishing forever, basically. I can do so much more with these smaller reels than I ever would have believed before. Fantastic bit of equipment. So if you're fishing mono on your multiplier, not necessarily a very extreme circumstance, I suggest you change. And these days you get the stuff on the Chinese platform for buttons and it's great quality. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, now spinning reels. I'm going to throw in some other stuff into this as well. Spinning reels, it doesn't matter what size they are, basically speaking. As a general starting point for leaders, how I do a leader is I judge it by how long I am, right? So I just take my outstretched arms and that's how long the finished leader is going to be when I've tied it and cut it or put a clip on the end of it or whatever you decide to do. And that way, if you lose it in a rock or two, you know, you can still retie a couple of times. And this one has been in a rock or two and it needs to be changed. Yeah, we're almost there, right? Almost. So that's basically the length you want. Yep, this has been retied one time, I think, judging by the length of it. So that's a good rule of thumb. Now this is a 60-pound leader and I am running a 35-pound mainline, and those two, they knot well together. You could even get away with 80-pound with this as well. If you were to try and do that with say 20-pound and a 60-pound leader, it's not going to tie very well. It's going to snag on everything. It's going to curl. It's just going to cause you so much trouble. So the leaders have to match the main line, okay? And I would say 2/3 of the diameter by increase is a good size for a leader, okay? And then you're good. If you get into anything more than that, it becomes difficult to tie. That's the only way I can explain that. So like if I was using 15 to 20-pound 8-strand mainline, I would use 30 to 40. If I'm using 35 to 40, I'll use 60 to 80, and so on. And then when it gets up from that point, now I've got to change because I want to keep the main line. And what I mean when I say I want to keep the main line, I don't want to go over 40-pound for a main line for a spinning reel. From the shore, if you're off a boat, you can do whatever you want. You can fish a 100-pound main line. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that. But in this world that we live in, you need every inch or every centimeter to count. And if your main line is PE 10 or a little bit lower than that, it's going to cut down on your distance. What I do at this point is I change to what I call a composite leader, and I'll link a video that explains that in the description. And what this is, most of the leader will be 4-strand braid, 100-pound to 35-pound. The diameter is absolutely perfect. And then the last, say, meter or so is monofilament tied to that. And that's for abrasion and to fool the fish. The rest of the leader is to support the jig while you're casting. I'm talking about jigs from 150 all the way up to 220 grams. And that would exceed the casting strength of the main line. And you need a longer leader as well when you're dealing with fish that might take a jig like that. Say 35, 40-pound halibut, for instance. That's the kind of thing I use it for. I haven't got to any tropical regions yet, but that's what I use it for. And this allows you a little bit of extra insurance if the fish runs under the pier or you have to land it on some rocks. All the leader knots I use are 1 knot, and it is the BF knot. I have come up with this myself and I've made a video on it, and I will link that in the description. It's very easy and quick to tie. You can tie it in sub-zero conditions with gloves on. It's just a really great knot. My opinion is it's just as strong as an FG and half the time to tie, okay? I'm sure this is going to really wind a few people up, but I have tested it. And if you test it and it fails, right, it's because you haven't tied it correctly. There are so many people making videos on this planet that are tying knots and making assumptions, even though sometimes they haven't even tied the knot properly. And something else they haven't taken into account is the fact that a knot's engineering is in itself perfection if it is engineered correctly, but fishing line cannot be counted on. So you can't count on no faults in a fishing line anywhere along, say, the 300 meters that you have on your spool. So people say there is no such thing as 100% knot. I say, no, you're wrong. There's no such thing as 100% fishing line. Okay, that's it. Now we've done the leaders, and now I'd like to talk about braided fishing line. A lot of people are writing in, they've got problems with wind knots and that kind of thing. There is so many facets to this subject. Now, the main problem is inherited line twist, and this can be fixed by loading spools face to face, okay? Multipliers do it naturally because of the orientation of the spool, but with a fixed spool, you'll have to get a machine. You just use a normal line spooler and a machine to put the spool from the reel onto, okay? And then the spool is rotated and it's loaded off the big spool of line. And if you can't do that, then you can load them face to face like this. There is a demonstration of this in a video. I will link that in the description. So you load them face to face and you pinch the line, you push the twist out with your fingers. It's not 100%, but it definitely makes life more easy on you. Now, apart from that, it's as simple as just changing the guides on your rod. A lot of times with the older rods that are geared towards monofilament, the guides are just positioned in absolutely the wrong place. When mono comes off the line that's in a big spool like this, and they have the guide, the first stripper guide, really close to the reel. With the more flexible 8-strand that you're going to be using, if you want to get all the distance you can out of a fixed spool, the loops are so big that they hit the face of that first stripper guide. They tie themselves around it, you get wind knots, you get crack offs and that type of thing. So with modern braid rung rods, the first stripper guide is almost twice the distance compared to a mono guide. So if you're going to change the guides on your old mono rods to fish with braid, you will have to move all the rings along, okay? And as they move towards the end, pack them closer together and add some in there as well, okay? You will need to buy guides specifically for braid as well. You can't use the mono ones anymore. They're useless for braid. I have a video about this as well. I did it to some of my rods. I will link that in the description as well. So I hope you find this helpful, and I hope it catches you more fish. I'm Billy. This is Billy in Tenerife. Wherever you are in the world, remember, I'll see you on the beach. Bye.